Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Zimbabwe is not ready for free, fair, and credible elections. Zimbabwe is not ready to be a democracy, a healthy and functioning democracy. We have been given so many opportunities to show the world that we can govern ourselves. We can be a healthy and functioning democracy. But again and again, we've fallen short. I'd like you to listen to this um, broadcast.
Zimbabwe's main opposition leader, Nelson Chamisa's pleas have finally been heard. He sat down for over 3 hours with a SADC delegation. Chamisa has written to the bloc 3 times before, begging for intervention in the political crisis. SADC's Electoral Advisory Council is in the country ahead of crucial elections that are happening later this year. It also met the governing Zanu PF, other political parties, civil society, and the media. Our correspondent coming out of Harare, Pindai Dube, is reporting that Chamisa hopes the message will reach leaders in the region.
The delegation is led by Judge Ticheme Likwa Dlamini of Eswatini and Advocate Notemba Chipuja of Namibia. They spent 3 hours with Chamisa and his party officials. Judge Dlamini said the meeting offered valuable insight.
The meeting has been a very, very good one, particularly with the Coalition for Change. This is so because they even brought to SADC. They had issues which they needed to talk about concerning the electoral process of Zimbabwe here.
Chamisa says he was able to pour his heart out on the dire political situation.
Well, of course, we raised the number of persecutions that we've suffered. Over 58 of our rallies that have been banned. We also raised the issue of Job Sikala, our honorable member of parliament, who has been unjustly incarcerated and illegally detained without bail. It's a big issue for us, and we raised this issue together with others who are being persecuted. So we hope that our issues will receive the attention of SADC, our regional body. Mind you, SADC is our body as citizens, and we need to be helped to help ourselves and to help the region for stability. Isn't it something that's bizarre that we have over 5 million people in the diaspora, and we are a nightmare in the headed to those in the region? South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, we just want to end these problems.
Before meeting Chamisa, the delegation met civil society organizations, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission ZEC, the governing Zanu PF, and some media organizations. The 4-member delegation is expected to meet the UN resident coordinator and also ambassadors from SADC countries. Pindaidue, Harare.
This is what is so tragic about it. Here is somebody who is in the media house and clearly should be helping to inform and educate the Zimbabwe populace. And they are wittering on about, oh, Chamisa met the SADC delegation for 3 hours. Yeah, but to what end and purpose? Do you seriously expect, could even with the good best will in the world, SADC can change anything now, 4 months before the elections? Chamisa met them. What did he ask SADC to do? What does he expect SADC to do? What do you expect SADC to do? We can't keep on going round and round in circles here. You know, SADC gave Zimbabwe the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms during the GNU, 2008 to 2013. Chamisa and his fellow MDC friends failed to implement even one reform during those 5 years. Not even one reform. Credit to SADC. They tried to get the 2013 elections postponed. to allow for the reforms to be implemented. They spoke to Morgan Tsvangirai and the rest of his MDC team and told them to their faces, if you go into these elections, you will lose. The elections are done. And still, Morgan Tsvangirai would not listen. What do you want SADC to do? Clearly, the opposition is in Zanu PF's pocket. That is the reality that we Zimbabweans, ordinary Zimbabweans, have got to accept ourselves. They failed to implement even one meaningful reform during the GNU. And when they were given the last minute to redeem themselves by not participating in the elections, they ignored that advice. And they've been participating in these elections, knowing fully well the process is flawed. Nelson Chamisa is now saying to SADC, oh, this process is flawed. We have been, Zanu PF has been disrupting our rallies and so forth. He is finally acknowledging that Zanu PF is rigging these elections. And yet, all along he has been saying they have got winning in rigged election strategies. One of those, the flagship of that, was the mass voter registration, mass voting, and protect the vote. In May last year, ZEC revealed that only 250,000 people had registered to vote. That's after 4 years of the voter registration exercise they started. 250,000. Even if we assume that all those were CCC supporters, that is only 4% of what CCC had set itself as the target. They had set themselves a target of 6 million people registering to vote. In other words, their flagship strategy had failed. They had failed to get the mass voter registration, and therefore then the mass voting is not going to happen. And now Chamisa is acknowledging it, that the process is, that Zanu PF is rigging the elections just 4 months before the elections. What does he expect SADC to do? This is just a crocodile shedding packets of crocodile tears. Chamisa and company are determined to participate in these elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they are giving Zanu PF legitimacy. That is the reality that we've got to deal with here. And to keep on going to SADC and pretending that SADC can somehow help only goes to show that we are not yet serious about getting Zimbabwe out of this political and economic mess. The ordinary Zimbabwean out there should have held Chamisa and company to democratic account during the GNU to make sure that they implemented the reforms. Even now, with the benefit of hindsight, we should hold them to account. We should be the ones saying to them, why are you keep on participating in these flawed elections? It's not as if they don't know. They know it. Tedai Biti, in an interview in 2015, acknowledged that it is futile participating in these flawed elections without reforms. David Coulthard, in his book, acknowledged the same thing. And he went one step further and explained why the MDC leaders have been participating in these elections. Greed. They all knew that Zanu PF is giving away a few gravy train seats, and that they found irresistible. We have got to acknowledge we have got an opposition here that is already in the deep pockets of the ruling party, Zanu PF. They will participate in these elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they are giving the process credibility and thus giving the result some modicum of legitimacy. I think if Zimbabweans cannot see that, then clearly we are not yet ready for a democratic Zimbabwe. Even if SADC or anybody out there was to rule these results as null and void and implement the democratic reforms and give us a clean start. My view is many Zimbabweans there are still very naive and gullible. That will not change anything. We are just as likely to lose that democratic foundation within a few, in fact, in less than one election cycle. The same tyrannical, corrupt, and incompetent opposition parties will assert themselves and undermine the democratic process. Zimbabweans are not ready for a democratic Zimbabwe. That is the reality that we've got to deal with here. To pretend that somehow SADC is going to change something in 4 months is naive, to say the least. Anyone at all would tell you that is just Chamisa and company wasting everybody else's time. And I'm surprised that actually this SADC delegation seemed to even suggest that they can do something. The truth is they cannot do anything. The SADC advice of 2018 was that MDC should not participate in the elections without reforms. SADC has never taken that advice off the table. That advice is still on the table. Chamisa and company, if they are serious about meaningful change in Zimbabwe, they should finally take that advice seriously. There is no point in participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that they are flawed. They are participating because Zanu PF is bribing them. The same reason why they failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform during the GNU. As Zanu PF cronies posted at the time, Mazwana MDC yadziza kudya Nyerere. MDC leaders have learned to enjoy the gravy train, good life. They will not rock the boat. That was their explanation, posting when they were asked during the GNU, why was MDC leaders not implementing any reforms? And of course they were right. That was the reason why MDC leaders failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform. As long as we've got a flawed electoral process, so flawed that even when Morgan Tsvangirai won 73% of the vote, it still was not good enough for him to get the keys to State House, as was shown in the 2008 elections. The number one primary purpose of the 2008 to 2013 GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging elections. That was the number one primary purpose. And unfortunately, many Zimbabweans out there still, that penny has not dropped. They still think they can participate in these elections and win. They are rigged elections, they accept, but they can have strategies on how to win rigged elections. If that's the reason why you are participating in these 2023 elections, then you should also accept the consequences of that. Because if you fail to win the rigged elections, you cannot complain. You knew they were being rigged and you still wanted to participate. We need to come to our senses. We need to use our head for a change. We cannot keep on blundering from year to year. This is 45, getting on to 43 years after independence. And we still cannot define what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections. And we still participate in a process that is so flawed. We don't even have a verified voters roll, in which the majority of the voters out there, particularly in the rural areas, are frog marched to go and vote for Zanu PF. And we think that process is a fair process. Zanu PF has already cherry-picked who will vote in these elections. Zanu PF has already denied 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora the vote, for no other reason other than the fact that most of those people in the diaspora will be there as economic refugees and or political refugees. And of course, they blame Zanu PF for it. They're not likely to vote for Zanu PF. Zanu PF knows that. Zanu PF also knows that it can rig elections internally in Zimbabwe. But outside, that may prove to be a bridge too far. And so the best way to do is to deny all the people in the diaspora the vote. The explanation the party has given for denying the 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora the vote was that, oh, the regime is under the Western sanctions. What has that got to do with the people in the diaspora? If you have a fight with your neighbor, you don't go home and beat your wife and children. What have they got to do with it? Even if we accept Zanu PF's argument that it cannot go to the European countries and North American countries to campaign for the votes, why has the regime denied Zimbabweans within SADC region the vote? The 3 million Zimbabweans in the diaspora constitute 37% of the possible electorate. And let's not forget here that in 2018, Mnangagwa won the presidency with 2.4 million votes. That's how significant the diaspora vote is. We should really stop being helpless. Zimbabweans have got to accept, if you want free, fair, and credible elections, you've got to work for it. You've got to show the world that you are ready. You know what free, fair, and credible elections are. You can hold, even if a democratic Zimbabwe was given to you in a silver platter, you can hold it. And if you honestly think, could this meeting with Chamisa and SADC is going to change the reality on the ground, it's going to stop Zanu PF rigging these elections, then you are incredibly naive. There is nothing that SADC can do in 4 months to stop Zanu PF rigging these elections. That is a fact. And the fact that Chamisa is making a big song and dance about meeting SADC. If I was one of the SADC delegations, I would have asked Chamisa, what exactly do you want SADC to do? Tell us. We told you that you should not participate in these elections without reforms. And you have been insisting in participating without reforms. Now you're asking SADC to intervene. What do you want SADC to do? Chamisa and company are participating in these elections out of greed. And they want to make a big song and dance to pretend that they are doing something to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, when in reality they are not. Chamisa and company will participate in these elections, knowing fully well that the elections are flawed and illegal. Zanu PF, as was seen by the recent Al Jazeera documentary, has been selling the nation's crown jewels for a song to amass wealth for itself, the ruling elite, and has been using some of that wealth to buy off the traditional leaders, the church leaders, the various government institution staff like ZEC, the police, the army, the judiciary, all to save one purpose: to help keep Zanu PF in power. And we should not be surprised that some of that wealth has been used to buy the opposition too. Whether we like it or not, the opposition is participating in these elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, because they know the few who get into these, who win some of these parliamentary seats and senatorial seats, are on the gravy train. And Zanu PF knows it. And in fact, has gone one step further. Mnangagwa has created Pollard purely to reward those who lose in the presidential race and reward them so that they keep on participating. The more opposition participate, the better for Zanu PF. It gives the process some modicum of credibility, and it gives him and Zanu PF political legitimacy. The only argument I will make to SADC is that they should stop pretending that this election process is free, fair, and credible. The leaders were absolutely right in 2013 when they said the elections should be postponed to allow for reforms. That is still valid now. And I think SADC should ignore whether or not Chamisa and company participate. They are going to participate anyway. We know that. They should just focus on the task on hand. Was this election process free, fair, and credible? And look at the evidence on the ground. Can you have free, fair, and credible elections when you don't even have a verified voters roll? Can you have free, fair, and credible elections when a significant number of the electorate are frog marched to go and vote for a particular party? Can you have free, fair, and credible elections when one contestant is able to cherry pick and deny 37% of the potential electorate the vote? In the past, SADC has turned a blind eye to these rigged elections under the pretext that the opposition participated. I think that pretext has got to be forgotten now. We know why the opposition is participating. We know the opposition is corrupt. We know Zanu PF has corrupted the opposition as it has corrupted many other institutions in Zimbabwe. And I think SADC leaders should stop punishing the populace, the rest of the ordinary Zimbabweans, just to punish the opposition. This crocodile tears by Chamisa should be ignored. And I think every thinking Zimbabwean there should condemn it for what it is. We want meaningful change in Zimbabwe, and we are sick and tired of these crocodile tears. Zanu PF is rigging these elections. CCC are participating, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, but they're participating out of greed. And we are asking SADC to stop turning a blind eye to the reality. Just focus on what is your task. You are going to be sent to Zimbabwe to observe the elections. Look at the evidence on the ground. It is not for SADC to think of, well, if we were to deny Zanu PF legitimacy, what then? It is not SADC's responsibility. It is the ordinary Zimbabweans' responsibility. What then? And I think in this particular case, ordinary Zimbabweans and the UN, for instance, can find a way forward. Yes, SADC did their best in 2008 to 2018 to try to get Zimbabwe to back on track. And unfortunately, the opposition sold out. But it is not for SADC to worry about that now. SADC are sending a delegation to observe the Zimbabwe elections in 2023. They should just focus on the basis of the evidence on the ground. Were these elections free, fair, and credible? If they were not, they should just come and say so. The consequences of that decision and what happens next should be left to ordinary Zimbabweans and the rest of the world. SADC should not have to worry themselves about that. That is what we want. And I am disappointed by some of the Zimbabweans out there, particularly in the media house, who are supposed to help inform our people, who keep on wittering about how Chamisa is now finally told SADC what to do. What do you want SADC to do? You know, we cannot keep on misrepresenting the facts on the ground here. There is nothing that SADC can do here. And Chamisa was just crying buckets of crocodile tears. That is a fact. Zanu PF is rigging these elections. Mnangagwa has got a war chest from selling the country's crown jewels to bankroll these elections. Every day you read of money being poured to buy off support for Zanu PF and Mnangagwa. The other day, it was reported that Zanu PF had bought cars for the prospective Zanu PF MPs. The country is running hospitals and clinics, do not even have ambulances. The staff, the nurses, many of them have left because of the slave wages that they're paid. Teachers and so forth, the same thing. Zanu PF is stripping the country of all the assets, including humans, for one purpose and one purpose only: to make sure that Zanu PF wins these elections and stay in power. Zanu PF is spending some of that loot to buy the opposition to participate. Chamisa is wittering about the flawed process, but I can tell you now, he's hell-bent on participating in these elections, regardless of all those things, because there is so much money on offer for those who participate. We cannot keep on sacrificing the millions of ordinary Zimbabweans for the good of the few. Zanu PF ruling elite, the opposition, those in key positions in SADC, the police, traditional leaders are being spoiled rotten too, the chiefs and headmen and so forth. That is what is happening in Zimbabwe. The country is being run down, stripped of everything, just for the purpose of keeping Mnangagwa and Zanu PF in power. And the opposition are playing along. And we cannot pretend not to say it. That is the historic fact. That is the reality on the ground. That is the reality that we must deal with. And we would like to see SADC go into Zimbabwe and give an honest opinion of the election process in Zimbabwe. That is all we are asking for. And that is not too much to ask. Thank you and good night.